So in the future, what we see the tendency is that there will be in vertical, that means there will be more integration of the internet with traditional industries. More and more traditional industries are changing during the digital transformation. And from horizontal, that means will be not be local enterprises. There will be more and more global overseas. And depth means that we'll have more AI, more hard technologies that will be technology driven. So that's the 3 stages. And from the stages we see there are 4 features, characters of digital economy. The first one, you have to be connected, IoT or something, connected with the internet. That creates value. And also second one is that you have to have some big platform, a strong platform, because no matter what are you doing, I think the most important feature of digital economy is that you have to be a platform, or you have to live with a platform. It's an ecosystem. And then we have data. Because you have the data, that means most important thing of digital economy, like the blood of the system. And data is driven more and more innovation. And the first character is intelligence. That means more and more intelligent innovation, AI. So the second thing I'm going to share is the sharing economy. Because we see that this is some awful is something like a yellow bicycle. And also on the left, there's mobike. It's 2 different kinds. But it looks like overnight. And it's going to be global. So how did they make that? And also, we see that there are more and more booming sharing economy, not only bicycles, but there are some charging power banks, umbrellas, and also you see some short rentals and toys and women's bags, a lot of things. So it's more and more. And also, we see the tendency, not only the market value, but also the job creation are growing. So we expect that the volume of trade estimated to reach 4,900 billion RMB in this year, and job creation reached to 70 million this year. So what is sharing economy? I think the most important that we don't need to own something, but we just use that to share something. So, but it's not traditional with the rental business. It's different. So what's the difference with the the rental history? Because I think that is a character right similar to digital economy. You have to be connected with your phone, sharing economy be connected to the internet, and you have to location-based service. You know where exactly you are located, and you get a service with a platform with like Didi. We order a car like Didi. That's a platform company with platform, and you got the data, and you find each other your demand and your service precisely with a platform. So you do that all more automatically, not by person. So all these 4 characters we see: connection, data, platform, and intelligent innovation are the 4 characters that shape the digital economy. So sharing economy is actually a very classical representation of digital economy. And also, it's a ecosystem. But during all the ecosystem, there are several key things that I want to address. The first one is that no matter what is sharing economy, you have to improve your service quality. And second, the credit system construction is very important, because I use your service, but I have to know who is providing service and how you are credit. It's better, especially if I want to share a room with somebody. Credit is very important. And also the policy guidance, because the traditional policy framework should be tailored to the new things. And some conclusions. And today we see that normally for digital economy, we have 3 stages: internet and mobile internet paths and IoT. And for features, we have connection, platform. Platform is very important for all the digital economy. And data, open data is very important. It's a blood of that's moving in digital economy. And intelligence that shapes the future, AI shapes the future. And also suggestion is that we know the tendency especially AI or technology-based or overseas globals tendency. And we know that it's an ecosystem for sharing economy. It's not just one thing, but a system, ecosystem. And we have to grasp the keys. The keys is that credit and policy frameworks, things like this. And before we before the end, want to have some look about the future. And we know when everybody like a note, we like a note, there is some line like the social media. When there is like printing, it's a note, it's some innovation. When we have printing and then we have newspaper, that's a social media, another kind of innovation like a line to make the printing more popular. And we have another note, film and broadcasting, which makes the film very more popular. And note, computer and line, internet and note, super computing or server, and also line, mobile internet. And another node is called computing and internet. What I mean is that when we have a node, it's like innovation, and we always have a line. It's social like a medium, which makes the innovation more popular. And we have another new innovation, another new node, and more medium to have it more popular. So what's the future after the artificial intelligence? We don't know. But I think the most important thing is that everything is possible in the future. That's my brief introduction. Thanks for listening. And another keynote speaker will be Michael Caine. Michael Caine is Senior Advisor at Analysis Mason, the guest professor at the Graduate Institute of Geneva. Please, thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to talk briefly about some regulatory issues that come out of this sharing economy. I think that there's going to be a lot of issues coming up as a result of it, so I'll just focus on a couple of regulatory issues. I mean, so first of all, based on this presentation, one can argue that the sharing economy is very efficient. It allows people to share kind of excess capacity of their car, their house, their labor. They can get part-time jobs as taxi drivers with Ubers. So there's a lot of efficiency, and even for regulation, it's pretty efficient because it's mostly self-regulating. I mean, if you would ask someone 10 years ago, would you get in the taxi with a perfect stranger that was sent to you by your phone, you would probably say, no, of course not. But with the rating system and the incentive of Uber and the other companies to generate trust, these are largely self-regulated applications or platforms. But it is a convergence between an online service or an online offering of a service and a traditional service that's generating some significant regulatory issues. And this isn't a new issue. Arguably, there have been 3 phases of this kind of convergence, online convergence between a new service and a traditional one that it resembles. I'm not sure if I got the order right, but if you think back to Napster, that was the first kind of sharing economy. It was oversharing because people were sharing illegally their music, and eventually it got shut down. But once Apple with iTunes and Spotify and other came along, they basically took care, put out of business traditional physical media, CDs and DVDs and things. Now most of it is coming online. So that's the first example of an online offering impacting a traditional sector. And then you have over-the-top communications, OTT communications. You can think about voice over IP, video over IP. So you had these traditional electronic communications that were competed with using the same equipment, the same lines with these online services, such as Skype, Netflix, YouTube. And that created some real regulatory issues because the traditional sectors were regulated. Telephony is regulated in some countries for prices, for allowing emergency access, for hearing disabled. So a lot of regulation on traditional telephony, and there was a big question first in a lot of countries, do we allow this voice over IP to compete with our traditional telephone company? And then if so, how do they compete? Do they compete on a level playing field? Are they differently regulated? So there were a lot of issues around the regulation, and now we're seeing it with content. In some countries that have regulations on content for child protection, certainly for extremism, for the amount of advertising or the amount of local content that's made available, there have been some real regulatory questions. Do we impose these regulations on YouTube or others that are offering this online video? And it's always a hard question because you have these entrenched companies that are now being competed with over the top, sometimes by foreign companies sending services into the country. And then this third one, the sharing economy, I think the surprise here is that you have these online offerings, online platforms competing with traditional sectors that 5 or 10 years ago never would have thought that they would see competition from the internet. The taxi industry, the hotel industry, a lot of these would never have thought that they would be susceptible to online competition. And yet they are. And again, you have this question that we'll go into a little more detail on of how to regulate these new services versus the existing traditional regulated services like the taxi industry traditionally. So I came across an article a few months ago that I think really highlights the issue, and it was about what's happening in the taxi cab market in New York. So in New York, there's a limit on the number of taxis, and they have to get what's called a medallion, which is a kind of a symbol that allows them to offer taxi service in the yellow taxis. And there's a limited number. They decided after the Great Depression that there was too much competition and that they would limit the numbers and then regulate them. So there was a set number of 13,587 medallions in New York City. And these were considered a very good investment, use the past tense there, because they not only went up in value continuously, but they offered a stream of revenue. You could drive one 8-hour shift, and then you rent out your taxi for 2 other 8-hour shifts and get some of the income from that. So they were viewed as very good investments. And as recently as 2014, so 3 years ago, the record was set for a medallion, and it was sold for $1.3 million just 3 years ago. Now there were 13,587 traditional yellow cabs. Now there's 61,000 Uber drivers in New York City, and not surprisingly, the medallions have plunged to as low as $150,000. And many of them sold through bankruptcies because people can't service the debt that they've incurred to buy these medallions. So I think that, so that clearly raises an issue for these taxi drivers, which was the focus of the article. But the article also talked about the fact that these companies face different regulations. The yellow cabs have some vehicle requirements on the type of vehicle, on allowing a certain number with disabled access. They're regulated on their fares. There's no surge pricing on a yellow cab, for instance. So there's different sets of regulations. So I think that really opens up 2 discussions, and it's not just for cabs. That's just a good example, and not all cities regulated the way New York did. But I think this really leaves open this question of how to manage the transition. Okay, I mean, just 3 years ago, people thought that they were buying a steady stream of income and making a good investment with their life savings, and now they've been wiped out because a new set of conditions came out. The city of New York in 2014 made $359 million auctioning off 350 new medallions. So they've made quite a bit of money out of these medallions. But I think we have to ask, is this fair for the taxi drivers? Shouldn't there be some kind of, or should we consider some kind of transition for people who invested under one set of conditions and now facing a new set? And the same question can be asked in other industries. How do we manage the transition of voice as it goes to IP? How do we manage the transition of video as it goes to IP and other areas? But the second one is a more long-term question. once everything eventually migrates to these new sharing platforms or they become predominant, what are the appropriate regulations in the long run on the way that the service is offered? So you could argue in the taxi cab example that you probably don't need fare regulations anymore because there's so much more competition. The fare regulations were the trade-off for having a limited number of medallions, right? If you limit the number of medallions, everyone can raise the rates. But if you have 61,000 more drivers, you may not need those. But you can ask legitimate questions if we thought it was okay to put on conditions on yellow cabs for offering disabled access and for servicing their equipment and having the proper insurance. What about the same for these new cabs in the long run? Do we abandon all regulation because it's offered online through the sharing economy? The same for workers, of course. Do the workers who are doing these part-time or even full-time jobs, how do they get their pensions? How do they get their insurance, et cetera? So I think there's that set of issues that has to be addressed in the long run. And then I think we're going to have to address a second set of issues, which is that these platforms can build up to be very, very large. Right? There was no global taxi company, yellow taxi company that offered a service in every city. It just didn't scale well. But Uber now offers, I think, 60 countries, 357 cities or something like that. For the simple reason that an online platform scales very, very well. Once it's built, you can add new cities at almost no cost, at least from the platform point of view. And there's significant network effects. The drivers don't want to drive for 10 different companies, and we don't want to load 10 different apps on our phone and try and manage which cab or which service we ask for every time we go online. So there's going to be some long-term questions about how we regulate not just the services that are offered, what regulations are appropriate, but how to regulate the platforms as well, I think. So I'll leave it at that. I just think we have to think about not simply putting legacy regulations on these new services, but also not necessarily letting them be offered without any regulation at all. We have to decide what were the appropriate regulations to protect us, to protect the drivers, to protect the users, and impose those as we go forward. And I think that's going to be a tough decision, tough discussions in each city and each country where these services are offered. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Since we have new infrastructures, so we have some platform, new players, so we need some new governance,
Yes.
new regulation. Yeah, thank you. And also, the next speaker will be Professor Cui Baoguo. He's the director of Center for Media Management and Economy Studies from Tsinghua University. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cui Baoguo. I come from China, and I'm working for Tsinghua University as a professor. My research area is the media economics and digital economics and internet governance. Today, I will talk about the challenge from sharing economy. Sharing economy in China grows fast since 2015. In 2016, there are 12 sharing companies were selected into the top list of the global unicorn. In China, sharing economy have the different kind, a lot of kind, such as sharing bike, sharing horse, sharing umbrella, sharing knowledge, sharing KTV, a lot of that everything can be shared today. but we want to ask, what is the sharing economy? Sharing economy in China, there are the very famous company. This is Didi and Mobike. In 2012 to 2016, the biggest market of the online taxi hauling in US and China. Didi and Uber are two biggest players. In the past 5 years, Didi has adopted the internet and big data based in China, make the big business and big market. The Mobike and the OFO are biggest player of the sharing bike market in China. They have started to develop overseas market. And sharing knowledge in China now still now pay for content is not popular, and advertising is still the main source of the income. Sharing space in China is very popular, but the law and the regulation on human sharing in China is a gray zone with many problems and risks. 快一点，走。可以，上一页。Of course, and the internet population is the basis of sharing economy. And now, in China, support the sharing economy is the new technology, such as mobile pay, Alibaba Pay, and WeChat Pay is very popular in China. In China, but the second in China, most Chinese customers are active, but worried about many problems, such as car calling for elders, jobs lost of taxi drivers, order of the city management, Bibles of the finance, and so on. And there are 19 companies and bankrupt. 7 of them is the sharing biker company. It has been serious social problem. Let's from the basic concept to understand the sharing economy. I think there are 3 keywords to understand and sharing economics. Next. It is the basic smartphone and the internet platform and the spare resource. Transfer the right to use temporarily. Sharing economy will construct the industry pattern from the new technology, such as the AR, VR, blockchain, and IoT. Sharing economy will reshape the economy. Next. I want to say that the sharing economy brings the challenge to the internet governance. Sharing economy will collect the progress of social co-governance in China. In China, sharing economy brings the challenges through the government system. Government system will transforming from the governance to government to governance. Traditional and economy government is the top-down, from top-down to bottom-up. At the beginning, Chinese government disliked to the multi-stakeholder model, but now it's changing. Next. Now China, now let me introduce the China's new model, the social co-governance, and China's explore on the internet governance. And in China, and internet governance is about global governance, and domestic governance is very difficult. In the global governance in China, and is a community of shared destiny in cyberspace. In domestic governance, in the social co-governance, its model is in China's and now the new governance model. I think maybe there are 4 keywords to the future of internet governance and sharing economy. It is dynamics, complexity, close field, and critical. And that's all. And hope that we have the better future. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Cui. And now we have the panel discussion, and I'll give the floor to Michael. And you have 40 minutes.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll have a lot of material for 40 minutes. So first I'd like to introduce a very distinguished panel. To my immediate left, Dr. Jovan Kurbalia, the director of the Diplo Foundation and the head of the Geneva Internet Platform, and the author of the definitive Internet Governance book that I guess is being released here, the new version. Kato-san, the executive director and country head of Japan for Genova LLC. Then Professor Zhou, the head of major project division at the Institute of Remote Sensing and Digital Earth, professor of Chinese Academy of Sciences, and deputy director of National Engineering Laboratory for Satellite Remote Sensing Applications. And finally, Professor Zhang, the associate professor, Department of Management at the Graduate School of Beijing Film Academy. So thank you all for being here. I wanted to start with just maybe a 1-minute introduction to your views, and in the case of Kato-san, the company that he's directing's participation in the sharing economy. If we can maybe just start with Jovan and just a 1-minute overview, and then we'll start with some questions.
Thank you, Michael. It's really great to be at this panel. Thank you for inviting me. And the next version of my book in Chinese will be released probably in the first part of 2018. The key challenge that we face here is, as it was indicated, a transition from traditional to the new platform gig access. I collected different names: collaborative, peer-to-peer, distributed economy. Seven descriptors of this new economy. And the key challenge is that all the rules that were developed over at least a few centuries are now challenged, and Michael brought some of the challenges from New York, but we are facing these challenges all over the world. And this is the key issue: how to adjust it and how to employ famous Schumpeter creative destruction approach to digital world. Will it work again? It goes that the new innovative tools are basically emerging and they are replacing traditional ones, and society has to adjust. Now, there are serious thoughts and serious analysis that the speed of adjustment is much slower than the speed of challenges. And it will come to the question of the future of work, future of jobs, question of ethics, a question of caring for the weakest part of society, and the list is very, very long. And I will just conclude with our analysis, Diplo's analysis of transcripts of the first day of the IGF. We do, as you know, you can follow the transcripts on the screen, and at the end of the day, we analyze these transcripts. And what is new trend comparing to the last year, based on yesterday's discussion, that the terms like efficiency, cost effectiveness, were gradually replaced by value-related terms, like trust, like sharing, like equality. Therefore, there is a general shift. It is now shift in making. We'll be following it after today's discussion. There is a general shift from the heavy focus on just efficiency, and we can do it, to the question how we deal with some consequences that development of technology is bringing. Related to the job, Michael mentioned the question of what's going on in New York with taxi drivers, but we can find these examples all over the world. And I invite you to follow this, we call it text on the linguistical observatory of the IGF, what's going on and how those changes are happening. Therefore, slight shift from efficiency, cost effectiveness to trust, inclusiveness, equality, and making sure that as few people are left behind with these changes as it is possible.
Where could people find that?
They can find on Digital Watch 2017, very simple, dig.watch, and well, I don't know what is behind the slash, but you will find the link on the website. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Kato-san?
Thank you, Michael. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I happened to be invited here a couple of days ago, probably because I work for a company called Genova, which does practice open innovation by sharing economy. What we share the brain of humans, intelligence. We create new technologies through the network of engineers, network of inventors all over the world. We have now a contract with more than 12,000 genius engineers with very different backgrounds. And they are sometimes like professors at the universities and some researchers on large research institutions, or retired engineers from large corporations, or consultants on technologies and so on. And we have a network of those great engineers all over the world, and defining some new technological challenges, and invent sometimes, and find out some new applications by using those brains of the world. Why we need this? For instance, large old companies who need new technology on the electric engineering side instead of mechanical engineering. And they're not necessarily good on developing new technologies which are not traditionally in their field. So they need some outside resources to help them to invent new technologies. So we try to connect those companies with intelligence of the world and create a new inventions. And the same way, many large companies in the world have many ideas, patents, and so on, but they do not know how to apply it. We connect people from different worlds and find out the new application, new business models for those. And in order to do that, we share the brain of humans. We share the brain of intelligence in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. So now it's official. Everything is being shared. Our brains. Professor Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So when I listened to the presentation our speaker proposed, I was thinking about the issue, the key issue about the sharing economy. So because I'm from the academy community, so I was thinking about two issues related to the contents with the growing concern. The first point is user-driven technology development, because in this age of information, we do need a network service and shared resource to accelerate the economic development. But how do we with this technology? I mean, the implementation of this issue. So they do have some predictions, like infrastructure and ICT solution provided by the different stakeholders. So as you see from the presentation showed, there are kinds of application covers transportation and logistics, even the delivery, also loans, online medical service. I think it is the contribution of ICT and emerging technology, but we still have to deal with some pending issue, like how to make most use of big data. I mean, the efficiency and contribution to the economic activity, and also like the question posed on the presentation. I think some new technology need to be introduced in the development of sharing economic activity, like electronic fencing, and also indoor policing. And we do know this technology will advance the application and improve the user quality, the service quality based on the sharing economy. So because I'm from the field of geospatial research, so I think optimized location-based service is also very important concern for kinds of sharing service over sharing economy. Is very important because it will focus on the feeling of the user. That's why I called it, we should focus on the user-driven technology development. This is the first point. And other one is growing concern about information consumption. Because I think there are two kind of categories for the sharing economy or sharing activity. Currently, we are focused on the sharing of articles for the unused, or we call the spares, the articles like housing, cars, and bicycle, maybe Wi-Fi, and also even in China, the battery recharger for the sharing is growing. It's growing market as well. So, but I think for the next step, the important thing is information service and data sharing. Because it will be a great opportunity to encourage the innovation, especially for scientists or young people. I mean, even for research activity. I remember in 2014, the Chinese government launched the strategy of double creation that encouraged people the ordinary people to open the entrepreneur with innovation ideas and with the application of the new technology. So it's called mass entrepreneurship and innovation. It's a quite huge campaign in China. So that will build a new relation between the consumer and the producer, because everybody acts as two roles. It's bilateral roles for each person. So I think I would take the satellite data sharing as an example, because maybe some of you are familiar with satellite data products. Before the 2008, there is a very nice data source on the world. But after 2008, the United States opened the data, including Landsat and other modest satellite, to the user. So I remembered the data volume arcade from 2008 to 2016 increased almost 5 times, from 2 petabytes to 8. But the download volume increased 8 times. It encourages the market. It stimulates innovation. It's a kind of different sharing economy, because not data was provided to the user, but also the algorithm and the thinking of scientists was provided for others to advance the innovation based on the existing effort. I think it's very important idea for the next step of sharing economy. And also, Sentinel, the European satellite, follows the system. I think there will be more and more countries will do similar things in this field. That's how I want to share.
Okay, so oops. So another version of the intellectual, but now the information sharing, using these platforms to not just share unused goods, but also unused ideas, or share the data. Okay, thank you, and finally,
okay,
Professor Zhang.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Mrs. Zhang Xiao. Thank you, Cynic. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm a teacher from Management School, Beijing Film Academy, and my research project recently is how to combine Internet Plus and Chinese film and video industries. And the Internet Plus is a national strategy in China. And I found there are many business model innovation in Chinese film industries. And most of is about sharing economic. I have several cases. For example, there is a famous website named Pigzhu. Pigzhu is a famous tale. Is a famous people in Asian China. It's a pig, and the website named Pigzhu Zhubajie, and the website they use many artists their spare time for design poster, for design many shorter videos. And another case is in China, Shenzhen. Shenzhen is the biggest high-tech city in China, and a company, a very small company, they have about 10,000 servers in their companies. So they use their spare time and their spare cloud computing abilities to rendering for the CG, for the shorter films, and for the animations. And in about 3 years, they have become the biggest rendering companies in China, and many of their customers from Europe, from USA. And their business model is also sharing economic. Yes, so I found many cases for sharing economic in Chinese film and Chinese media. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, form of sharing of our capital to allow everyone to lower the cost of making films and rendering films. So thank you for the brief introduction. I've got 3 questions, and then we'll turn over to the audience. So I'll just put the questions out. If you would like to answer, please go ahead, and we'll take turns. But the first one will be on the economics of these platforms and the sharing. The second on the regulatory, and the third on predictions. So, and then we'll open up to the audience. So the first one is just on the economics, how the platforms mediate or optimize the supply and demand through the platform, but also how the platform itself distributes resources between the drivers or the workers or the owners, the resources, and the platform itself. So really the economics of how resources are redistributed as a result of the sharing economy, if anyone would like to answer that one.
Well, I may try just to contribute to what we found in our research at the Diplo. We found the 3 core elements in this economic model. It's first temporary employment in most of sharing economy, apps as the key for peer-to-peer exchanges, and rating system for evaluation. What we found as one important element is that platforms are becoming market in itself. Therefore, this is especially with the easy chances or a sort of likeliness to have a monopoly, because digital field is by its nature prone to monopolies. There could be serious distortions when it comes to the market economy, because platforms could replace basically broader ecosystem of the market economy. This is one trend which is increasingly indicated as a risk, coupled with the monopolies and the centralization of the resources. Those are few elements: temporary employment, apps for peer-to-peer transactions, and a rating system for evaluation, plus the risk of having the platforms as basically new complete market, coupled with also replacement of so-called invisible, Adam Smith invisible hand, with various artificial intelligence tools for optimization of exchanges on the platforms.
Great, thank you. Kato-san, if I can put you on the spot,
Sure.
Sharing cars is one thing. I mean, they all have 4 wheels and they get us somewhere, but there are differences in the way that we think. Does the sharing economy, the way you do it, sharing intelligence, does that give, the smarter or the more productive a bigger share of resources, more contracts, because they can differentiate themselves more than, let's say, a driver or owner of an apartment could?
Yes, that's exactly the case. When we have a new technical challenges, people have the same questions. For instance, auto companies, they need better quality of batteries for electric vehicles. Everybody is looking for new technology. Large auto companies have thousands of engineers who are developing new technology in their field, but that's not necessarily enough to have a new challenges, new technical development. Through the network of engineers we created, we can have an access to somebody in India, for instance, who are having a great technology on some materials to be used for batteries, and we can connect them to find out a new business opportunity. Companies does not need to pay them for daily salaries. all they need is to use this sharing economy to find out the right person, right engineers, right scientists, and find out and ask them to develop some technology or come out with new inventions. And in the case of a Genova business model, we just pay them for ideas. We buy them and get all those technology in many cases patented. We have over 5,000 patents already, and license them to the companies who need this. So it's very efficient way of large companies to have a new development quickly, cheaply, and very efficiently. Unless we have a good result, we don't need to pay. Those people are normally hired by companies or universities, and they don't need to be paid for their daily thinking. But on one question of new technical challenges, they give us answers and paid. And they're happy. Normally, those professors, somewhere in the world, do not, have enough resources to patent those ideas, although they have a capability of creating new technology. So we give them opportunity to have such inventions and commercialize them. And companies are happy by paying little on a pinpoint, basis to get the right technology and get rewards.
Great. Professor Joe, when you're sharing your car with one person, when you're taking a ride for one person, you can't use it for anyone else. It can only be in one place. But big data, like all data, can be shared without cost. It can be duplicated. The satellite data, of course, can be shared. Is it shared at a cost, or is it reducing the incentive of people to create their own data sets and maybe do their own innovations, put up their own satellites because they can use everyone else's? So how has it impacted investments and innovation in these fields that you deal with?
Yes. Since you have a good question, I think for this kind of sharing activity, it's definitely about saving the investment and saving energy for the personal involvement. But if you try to do the analysis based on the personal activity, I think it requires special expertise and also very special fields. Like when we're talking about crowdsourcing, or there is another example I think about the something rapid response to emergency, like the Eel Lake, like the searching for the lost ship or airplane. So this kind of intelligence from different people, everybody can use the data products and the intelligent tools try to extract information. I mean, in that case, we don't need a data center or just based on the knowledge, special knowledge of expert or personal interest. But in other occasions, if we do need analysis or attract the tendency or the common problems posed by the usage of these sharing cars, sharing articles. So I think there is high requirement for the data clustering and also the cloud-based searching and positioning and other useful tools.
And finally, Professor Zhang, you talked about how creative industries, filmmaking, is now sharing the cloud, and is that helping creation? I mean, is that increasing creativity, or is it now that one company is doing all the film or all the background film for everyone else, and maybe the innovation levels or the creativity will slip? Do you think it's helping or hurting the creation of films?
it's a business model innovation. You know, that case, the companies is very small, but they have many servers, so they develop the website and the sharing app and the sharing website and to the world, and so they can use their spare time and spare computing abilities for the rendering, so they entered the industries. I think it's a very good case for small companies, small IT companies to enter the culture and the film industries. Yeah, it's a good case for the business model of sharing economy. Yeah, I think.
She has a question.
I think we have Q&A after the session. Is
It's
that
okay. No, I think.
Also, it depends on you.
Yeah, but please. I have one more question in background, but please go ahead.
Thank you for this panel, and I'm inspired by your discussion. And my question is there any quantitative method we can use to measuring the impact of sharing economy on the society?
Any quantitative way of sharing the impact?
Yeah, if we want to
measuring the
see
impact.
how is the sharing economy to contribute for the public or social good, is there any quantitative methodology we can use to measure it? Yeah, thank you.
Michael knows that we discuss it often, and we call it sometimes cyber voodoo, because it is really amazing how a relatively scientific field and engineering field like internet has a very little data of the impact on society. And there are in particular two keywords that you can find data in the range of millions to billions. And sometimes we think that consultants sit somewhere in the room and flip the coin and say, okay, what we are going to put 2 or 3 billions. And it is particularly strange in two fields. One is impact, as you indicate, the economy on the society. And second is cybercrime and cybersecurity. The second field has another aspect because companies and banks are not reporting attacks because of the loss of reputation and other issues. But it is one of the major challenges of internet governance to have some data and some evidence on which we can build a policy, from the impact on society to the risk for the societies. And we have the compilation of surveys from the major companies, consulting companies, to the international organizations, and we found really, I would say, disputable methodologies. And statistics, as we know, can hide as much as it can reveal. And this is a major challenge, I would say, for academia, for the policy think tanks to try to get closer to some evidence on which we can base the policy and understand which is happening around us. We see the impact, we experience it in daily life, but we know we have very little data on it. There are a lot of surveys. We found a collection of about 20 surveys on e-commerce and impact with different numbers, ranging from billions to trillions, and you have all sorts of economics. I still rely heavily on the World Bank. They put the most serious efforts to find reliable data.
Can I add something?
Please.
Yes, I think it's hard to, we have evaluated the quality tools for economy because OECD has a lot of research and released a book in 2015, named is Measuring Digital Economy, and I translated that into Chinese version. So they do have in digital economy, but right now we don't have such kind of evaluation for the social impacts. And also we have similar research in China. Sure.
Yes, please, and then back there.
Thank you. My name is Ji Haojun. I'm a MAG member representing China. First, I would like to touch a bit on the question raised by the young lady there. I think the impact of sharing economy goes far beyond economy itself. So you cannot quantify it by certain parameters. If we, because sharing economy can generate lots of positive effects, raising the utility, maximize the utility of resources, and raise the productivity, etc. And in the meantime, it can also cause some problems. So the sharing economy, you have winners and you have losers. So the benefits of sharing economy, some of the certain aspects of them would cancel out each other. That's one thing. And the second thing is that if we really want to measure its benefits, you can find it in some indicators. For example, the carbon efficiency ratio. The carbon efficiency of different countries. China is making great effort in raising our carbon efficiency in our effort to fight global warming. And in this area, actually, it's very we have very clear early indicator that our carbon efficiency is really going up, and that's it also means that China's economy is transforming to a positive direction. And also, I want to touch on some aspects which have been raised by our panelists. The first is that sharing economy could change a lot of things. As a Chinese, every time I go back to Beijing and I go back to my hometown, I found that I'm going back to another new country. The changes every year it's very huge, and it takes a bit time for me to adapt myself to my hometown every time I go back. And benefits is there, but we are seeing lots of negative side. China is we could say that is the champion of the world in the area of sharing economy, and we are benefiting. We are benefiting from the early harvest of sharing economy. But in the meantime, as the leader of sharing economy, China is also paying tuition fee, not only for itself, but for the whole world. For example, the mobiles. People are enjoying lots of benefits. They can, from the railway station to the company, the last 1 mile, and it's good that you have a mobile to ride. But there are too many such companies. The competition is so fierce. Now many companies are going bankrupt, and the users are having difficulty to getting their deposited money back. That may cause certain extent of financial crisis, big social crisis, and many companies the bikes are piling up in wilderness, it's a big waste also. So in a sense that sharing economy can save resources, can maximize the utility of resources, it can also create new type of waste. That's another problem. And also we have, because sharing economy, we rely on big platforms. For example, for the car sharing, you want to find a car nearby which offer a price you can accept. You need to input lots of your personal data, and the privacy is a problem. So we have to see the benefits and also the challenging and the negative side of sharing economy. That is efficiency versus stability of the society, competition versus monopoly, regulation versus development. We either allow it to develop first and regulate later, or we let it develop first and regulate. We put in place the regulation first and then develop. But to have regulation too early would have a problem that we may kill the baby too early, kill the baby in infancy. Without regulation, it may grow into a monster. It grow in a barbaric way. That's a problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those points. Does anybody want to comment on that? I mean, I think it's an excellent point because you usually think there's too little competition because once there's a platform, no one else thinks that they can enter, and now we're seeing the opposite. So as you say, you're paying tuition to everyone else to not create a bicycle mountain.
In China, you know, as a Chinese, I'm very proud of our sharing economy, but in China, we always go to extremes. We either have too much competition or we have too strong monopoly. Now, in the mobile industry, we are going from too much competition to monopoly. When all the most of the small mobile companies die, we only have one or two. Monopoly will come and they will charge a high price. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
Sorry, yeah. Okay. Yes, I have a question actually to the whole panel, and that's the issue of sharing economy and SDGs, because we know from figures that the ride-sharing services are actually increasing transport in cities, which is completely out of touch with what we want in the SDGs, sustainable transport. So every time somebody decides to take an Uber instead of taking a bus, it's a losing out on the SDGs. So I think that is something that is not taken into account in all these sharing economy ideas, that if I am exposed, if I have to arrive at the airport in a city and there is no public transport because there are only sharing economy vehicles, then this is a loss of quality of life, it's a loss of quality of choice, it's a loss of privacy, and it's a loss of sustainable transport. So I think this is a topic that really worries me, because some cities in emerging economies that don't have good transport public transport systems, they say, oh, let's forget about building the metro or the BRT. We just go for for these vehicles. And I think that is a real danger. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I recall in 1994, I went to Beijing in the first China Internet Conference, and I was speaker, and the theme I was given was Internet and Business. Now, after 20 years, I feel like I'm a student. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentations from China. My question is, let's say, what is the weakest piece of the ring of the sharing economy? Or what is the problem that we really need to address now to protect the citizens' benefit, or existing industry, or law and order, something which is not yet clear. And because this is a governance panel or workshop, I'd like to know your views about this. And for the interesting remarks of the other gentleman there about OFO or, all the sort of failures. The beauty of the market economy, as we know, is that we allow the failures, right? How many PC companies were there when Apple and all the bunch of them came out, and how many are still now? Very few, right? It happened to the digital watch in Japan, or calculators, or many others, cars and bikes. So for any industry in the early days, they'll rush. There are so many competition, like the gold rush, and the winner will be very few. And meantime, if you do the early intervention And then it will not allow these failures, and it will not allow the big successes. So that's my view, and I'd like to hear your comments. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So anyone on the biggest issues to address?
Well, Izumi, the timing matters in everything, and in particular in the digital economy. Too early intervention can suffocate developments and creativity. And I think we are now, at least at this Internet Governance Forum, and over the next 2 years, we are going to address this question of right timing. I would say societal and political pressure of people who are left behind is becoming stronger and stronger. We saw the recent political developments in a few countries, which basically are to some extent caused by people who are affected by too fast developments. There is whole generation which I usually label too young to die and too old for the digital revolution. And this generation cannot be left behind, and it will be one of the major challenges. But pressure will be coming from society and for the request to have a more fair distribution of dividends of digital economy, as the World Bank put it in their reports 2 years ago.
Anyone else? Okay, maybe in the back.
Thank you. Very briefly, I would appreciate to hear from Professor Tsai a further explanation of a term I've never heard before, and it's the social co-governance in China. This is a fascinating new term. And the second comment and question I have is for Jovan. You made reference to Schumpeter. Now, how does this make sense with the decision in the US to leave internet neutrality? To my knowledge, internet information is not part of WTO yet, access. So I could imagine that in major markets, if there is no more neutrality in terms of access, some monopolies could be further strengthened by just not giving access, or by charging in a discriminatory manner some companies more than others. What does this whole thing mean for trade and international cooperation? The fact that the US is leaving internet neutrality. Schumpeter 2 or 3?
Microphone, please.
Microphone. Oh, yeah,
Excuse me. Let me answer in Chinese and for translation.
Yes.
那个我用中文来回答吧。
Let me introduce it in Chinese, and I will be the translator.
那个中国政府的这个社会共治，在一开始的时候，中国对这个多利益攸关方的治理模式是不太接受的。但是
At the beginning of the governance of the internet, Chinese government is in a kind of dislike the idea of the multi-stakeholderism. Yeah.
但是遇到这个共享经济和数字经济在处理这些社会问题的时候呢，它这个开始呢是仅仅靠互联网治理是解决不了问题，靠政府本身也解决不了问题，它需要政府、互联网的这个共治，还有互联网的企业，再加上呢这个社群，还有加上这个社区，共同来治理这样的一个模式。实际上这种模式呢，就和这个国际上互联网治理的这种多利益攸关方非常接近了。所以通过共享经济呢，也使中国的这种互联网治理模式和社会治理模式和国际的这种治理模式在接近。
And when it comes to the sharing economy and the digital area, and it finds out that it's more difficult to governance the internet by one party. So the Chinese government, they concerned about invite all the stakeholders into the governance of the internet, and because these follow the international pattern of the governance of the internet, and our model is based on the multi-stakeholders.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got time, I think, for one more question, and I'll turn back to the organizers.
Yes, hello. Thank you. My name is Jonathan Zook from the Innovators Network Foundation. And I just wanted to follow up on what, in your first keynote, about what you were saying about regulation and which ones to try and apply. And I've been amazed that at the sessions I've been attending thus far at the IGF, the impetus seems to be to figure out how to make these new economy business models look like old economy ones so that we can apply legacy regulations rather than looking at them afresh.
So listen from him.
Yeah.
About who I am.
Actually, we are good friends.
Yeah.
Why we meet tomorrow?
Yes,
I mean, where?
主要
在哪里？要在哪里？
我们就在我们那个地方。
我到时候再告诉你。要在你那边吗？
啊。
在你 IDU 那个building。
我们那里附近吧。
OK。那我们怎么见面？
怎么见面
？10点在哪里见面？
我们 message 或你用 WeChat 吗？
我没有 WeChat。
message 你的手机 message。
OK。好。
有什么 OK 吗？
So how about Caine Chen? Is he doing Caine Chen?
钱华林 OK。
Yes.
学历economy，我觉得有几件事情是事实，就是有一个证明是中国现在募款很简单。OK， 这是事实。比较容易。
然后呢？
但是要把这个现在中国在做的学历economy，你要把它说成是一个，你可以说它是一个人性的风险，但是不太容易现在就定义它是一个成生的 model， 因为里面还有问题，像在国内大家都知道，比如说单车的问题啊，滴滴的问题，其实都有些问题。那这个 Sure. We need to move. You want me to move? It's yours.
Thank you.
Nudging you.
Hi.
Well, you can do one over in Charles. Yes, I'm doing the online this.
Okay.
Okay.
You pair up.
And you all can.
Just bring order.
5 minutes. Stop.
You have a timer. I just use it when time is so.
You guys can figure out how to let us know what's coming.
Okay.
Glad there's somebody. But Yatame is also okay. Wonderful. Okay. Is somebody doing this?
Really?
I don't know anything about it.
Okay.
Really? Did you have some other session before this or no? Is the first one?
Yeah, my first time doing this. I was in a different panel, but not online.
Online.
Yes.
Well, they have like in every week someone is doing this. So.
You just sit here.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe you can put your questions. Yeah. Okay, this remote Jane said. And this person also supports that.
Sorry, I'll just turn off your mic.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is just an announcement that we'll be starting the next session on online freedom for all is equal to no unfreedom for women, and how we solve this equation in about 2 minutes. So for those who will be leaving the room, don't go. And those who've come, stay, and we'll be starting shortly. Thank you. So once again, good evening, good afternoon. If you're still jet lagged, good morning, wherever you may have come from. I know it's been a long day, and I hope you've been having a good IGF so far. Welcome to the session titled Online Freedom for All equals No Unfreedom for Women. How do we solve this equation? My name is Nanjira Sambuli from the Web Foundation, and I'll be this session's moderator. I'm pleased to be joined by a fantastic panel of women, no apologies, but does not mean that we are hostile to other groups, just to say that it should also be normal to see all women speak up to various issues. And I know that some of you may have already been involved in this discussion on technology-mediated violence. It's never an easy topic. It drains the soul many times. But we also just want to reflect on what has been working so far, what the role of each actor is, and just see how we can learn from one another and take the stuff that's proven impossible, adapt it to various contexts, and just ultimately make sure that the online spaces are free and secure and safe for women and girls, and indeed marginalized communities to actually occupy them. So I'll just start with a quick overview of what we're going to be trying to discuss here before I pass on to the panel. I think there's already some great recognition that something has to be done in closing not only the digital gender divide in access, but in making sure that women's meaningful use is assured, and that is meaningful use of the internet. But zeroing down on what exactly needs to be done to guarantee a gender-inclusive and safe online public sphere is often the more difficult part of the discussion. So online gender-based violence, as you all know, combines misogyny, misogynoir, as another session was discussing earlier, homophobia, racism, and other prejudices that are making online freedoms elusive, and particularly for women. Now, understanding sexism in all its unholy variants is vital to know how best to balance competing considerations on freedom of expression online, women's rights to freedom from violence, whether these are legal measures that must be taken, private complaint resolution mechanisms by platforms that we use, or civil society-initiated campaigns and awareness programs. So this panel will reflect on good practices in this domain. We'll try and explore what the role of governments, civil society, platforms, intermediaries more broadly, can be how they can be improved upon, who's snoozing on their job, if anyone is snoozing on their job, or also just reflecting on what's been working, because I think we should be able to also acknowledge that some efforts have also been in place to work on these issues. We'll try and see what the legal framework, what's the space of legal frameworks in addressing this issue, and again, balancing all these tensions between freedom of expression versus addressing this online and tech-mediated violence. So also what more, I don't want to say what can, but what more civil society can do, because civil society has been doing a lot even before we started talking about gender-based violence as far as technology goes. So just assessing what more can be done and not necessarily adding more burden. And we already have 24 hours a day, but working 27 of them trying to make this thing work. And with that, I will just invite my panelists to introduce themselves and give reflections from various country perspectives on what's been working, what's not working, and then we will invite you to have a discussion as well. Hopefully there's somebody in this audience or somebody who will walk in who's also from a government perspective. We couldn't get anyone, as you all may know, to get on the panel, but maybe they'll feel this is a safe space for them to join this discussion. Last but not least, if you'll be sharing your perspectives through any of the online platforms, please feel free to use the hashtag Women's Rights Online so we can keep stock and continue the conversation once we leave this room. So without further ado, I'll first hand over to Nandini, who will give us her perspectives from her work in India.
Thank you, Nanjit. My name is Nandini, and I'm from a civil society organization in India called IT for Change, and I will just use this time to share with you broadly the key problems in our particular context when we look at technology-mediated violence against women. Like in many other contexts, technology-mediated violence is pervasive, and the mere fact of a woman being online or expressing her opinion is sufficient to put her at risk of misogynistic abuse, harassment, and even threats of physical violence. And women journalists and activists, women who are not cisgender, and women from socioeconomic groups that have been historically marginalized, such as India's Dalit communities, they are particularly susceptible to these attacks. And in recent times, we are also seeing the rise of systematically organized troll armies who hound women who have a political opinion that is different from the majoritarian discourse. And in what is most ironic is that even the government-mandated spaces of consultation, like a citizen consultation on the national policy for empowerment of women, or the social media account of the Ministry of Women and Child Development, even these things are being trolled. And I mean, the minister herself expressed her helplessness and outrage about this and demanded that trolling be recognized as a criminal act. So this is a context in which I come from and we work in. And if you look at how our legal institutional response mechanism is to deal with this, I don't have time to talk about this in great detail, but I would just like to focus on 3 key issues, which may also be similar in other contexts elsewhere. One is that we don't have any dedicated legislation that deals with abuse, sexual harassment, or the violence that women experience online. And these acts are usually booked under a range of pre-existing legislation. One of these is the Indian Penal Code, which is a Victorian-era old legislation that comes from a highly moralistic framework. And it basically, at best, it's about benevolent protectionism, and at worst, it looks at violence as the woman asked for it and who asked her not to be safe. It's that kind of thinking that frames this. And the other legislation that we have under which the police usually book online acts of violence is the Information Technology Act, which is actually framed as a piece of commercial law to make the online environment secure for business transactions. But it does have a couple of provisions that talk about the transmission of images with sexually explicit content. And what you will find interesting is that there is a mix of obscenity provisions and privacy-related provisions. So it speaks the old moralistic discourse, and it speaks